What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors walks onto a daytime talk show expecting a simple interview about his latest project, only to find himself ambushed with questions that cross every professional line? The tension in the studio was palpable, the audience silent, and what unfolded next would become one of the most talked about moments in television history. This wasn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. This was about respect, boundaries, and the moment a legendary actor decided he'd had enough. Before we get into what Joy Behar said that set everything off, imagine sitting under studio lights, knowing millions are watching, believing you're there to talk about your work, only to realize you're about to be put on trial for your family's pain. Michael Douglas walked onto the set of The View with his familiar confidence, greeting the audience as applause filled the studio. He had been here before, always navigating the sharp humor and pointed commentary with grace. Today was supposed to be different in a good way. He was proud of his new film, a project he had nurtured for years, and he looked forward to discussing its themes and challenges. Settling into his chair, he adjusted his jacket and smiled as Whoopi Goldberg welcomed him warmly, praising his career and expressing excitement about the movie. Michael relaxed slightly, sensing a familiar rhythm. But then Joy Behar leaned forward, her tone shifting the energy in the room. Before the conversation could settle into safe territory, she redirected it sharply. She brought up Michael's son, Cameron, and his past struggles with addiction and prison. Her question wasn't framed gently or thoughtfully. It was blunt, accusatory, and deeply personal. She asked whether Michael believed he had failed as a father and whether his Hollywood lifestyle had contributed to his son's downfall. The applause died instantly. The studio fell silent in a way that felt heavy rather than respectful. Michael's expression changed. The practiced smile faded, replaced by a tight jaw and focused eyes. He responded calmly at first, making it clear that he was there to discuss his film, not his family. But Joy pressed on, insisting the topic was fair game because Michael had spoken about it before. With each follow-up, the atmosphere grew more uncomfortable. The other hosts shifted in their seats, sensing the line that had been crossed. What had begun as an interview was quickly turning into something else entirely, an ambush that left no room for dignity, only reaction. As Joy continued, her questions sharpened, framing Michael's son's struggles as a consequence of privilege and excess. Michael pushed back, his voice controlled but unmistakably firm. He explained that sharing parts of his life in carefully chosen interviews was not an invitation for public interrogation. There was a difference between openness and exploitation, and what was happening now felt like the latter. He emphasized that his son's recovery and growth were not topics to be weaponized for daytime television. The tension escalated when Joy dismissed his concerns, suggesting that public figures couldn't hide behind privacy when it became inconvenient. That was the moment Michael leaned forward, the calm cracking just enough to reveal anger beneath it. He challenged the double standard, pointing out how easily the show dissected other people's lives while shielding itself from scrutiny. The exchange became less about one question and more about power. Who had the right to ask, who was expected to endure, and who decided the limits? Other hosts attempted to intervene. Sonny Hostin tried to redirect the conversation back to the film. Ana Navarro and Sarah Haynes exchanged glances, clearly uneasy. But Joy refused to let go, insisting she was simply doing her job. Michael countered that journalism without empathy was not journalism at all, calling it tabloid garbage. Dressed up as daytime television, he accused her of seeking a viral moment rather than a meaningful discussion. The audience sat frozen, unsure whether to react. Cameras captured every tightening jaw and raised eyebrow. When Joy mocked his sensitivity, suggesting he couldn't handle tough questions, the room audibly gasped. Michael stood up slowly, deliberately, a physical signal that the conversation had crossed into something irreversible. He asked Joy whether she had children, exposing the hypocrisy of probing someone else's family while guarding her own. The confrontation now had a gravity that went beyond entertainment. Michael spoke about his son's fight with addiction, about accountability paired with compassion, about how recovery was not a spectacle. His voice rose not in rage, but in conviction. This wasn't a performance. It was a line being drawn, live on television, in front of millions who suddenly realized they were witnessing something raw and unscripted. As the argument continued, Michael's anger gave way to something more piercing: clarity. He articulated what the conversation could have been if it had been approached with respect. He explained that addiction should be discussed as a health crisis, not a moral failure, and that families navigating it deserved understanding rather than blame. These were the conversations that could help viewers at home, not questions designed to shame. Joy defended herself, claiming her intention was to address privilege and responsibility. Michael didn't deny the importance of those topics. Instead, he criticized her method. Context mattered, he said. Reducing years of struggle into a confrontational soundbite stripped away humanity. It turned pain into a prop. The hesitation in Joy's response, when he asked whether her goal was a meaningful discussion or a viral moment, spoke louder than any words. The other hosts began to shift more openly. Whoopi Goldberg acknowledged that there was a clear difference between tough questions and cruel ones, and that this had crossed into cruelty. That admission changed the dynamic. Joy was no longer backed by the table. The audience murmured, sensing the balance of the room tilt. Michael then did something unexpected. He answered the question Joy should have asked. He admitted his mistakes as a father, acknowledged his regrets, and affirmed that addiction was a disease, not a personal failure. His honesty softened the room, transforming anger into reflection. This was the answer born from compassion, not coercion. He made it clear that this wasn't only about him. It was about every guest who had ever been blindsided, forced to smile through humiliation for the sake of promotion. By speaking directly to the camera, he addressed viewers who had endured similar invasions of privacy, reminding them they owed no one their pain. The moment felt less like television and more like a reckoning, exposing the cost of entertainment built on ambush. Joy, however, doubled down. She stated plainly that she didn't regret asking the question and insisted Michael's reaction proved her point. The room reacted with visible discomfort. Even her colleagues seemed stunned by the refusal to reflect. Michael, surprisingly, welcomed it. He wanted the audience to see exactly what accountability without empathy looked like. He accused her of confusing cruelty with courage, of mistaking ambush for truth-telling. His words were sharp but measured, cutting deeper because they were deliberate. He explained that real journalism challenged power without demeaning humanity. What had happened instead was a public shaming disguised as scrutiny. As Sunny suggested a commercial break, Michael refused. He didn't want edits, spin, or narrative control. He wanted the moment preserved in full. This wasn't about winning an argument. It was about exposing a system that thrived on discomfort and humiliation. Joy remained defensive, arms crossed, insisting she was being portrayed unfairly. Michael closed with a statement that reframed the entire encounter. He reminded everyone watching that decency still mattered, that stories carried weight, and that exploiting pain had consequences even if ratings rewarded it. He didn't storm off. He didn't shout. He stood his ground, making it clear that respect was not optional, even in spaces built on confrontation. When the segment finally ended, the silence lingered. What viewers had seen wasn't a celebrity meltdown. It was a boundary being enforced in real time. Long after the cameras cut away, the moment lived on, not as gossip, but as a reminder that some lines, once crossed, demand to be called out.